run clubs, Rory. These have really taken off for young people, typically in the UK. And running as a exercise is really picked up because of it, because there are these exclusive run clubs. And I'm thinking, would Rory Sutherland join a run club? I'm guessing the last time you did a marathon was before it rebranded to Snickers.
I won't be joining Jamie Lang on a series of ultra marathons soon. By the way, I'm a bit uncertain about, but
what's the psychology of them?
So one really interesting thing to do is always to take back things which we think are obvious and dig out their history, because things we just assume are universal and obvious, there was a time when they weren't. Now, I'm old enough to remember seeing my first jogger, and I didn't know what they were.
Not to be confused with Dogger.
No. That was a much more distressing and later experience when I crossed the Surrey border. No. Interesting fact, by the way, dogging was invented in Surrey to give them... So I live in Kent, so we're convinced that once you cross the Surrey border... But my theory is that dogging was invented in Surrey to give them something to do when it was too dark to play golf. That's my theory. That's my theory. And I'm sticking to it. But no, the first jogger, I'm a kid, I'm about 7, my brother's about 9, and I'm driving through Raglan, where I grew up, which is a Welsh village in the Welsh borders. And there's a man running down the street, okay? My first assumption, I'm not making this up, okay? Because, you know, I've read sort of Richard Scarry books. If you saw someone running in the street in what would have been 1972, you assume they're being chased by the police. I genuinely am not making that up, okay? And what's that man doing? He's running. And you either assume that there was Godzilla or something. You know, in other words, there had to be a reason to run in 1972. I said, look, what's that man doing? Who's he running away from? And my brother said, he's a jogger. And I said, what's that? Okay. Now, it turns out I did delve into this a bit. It started in New Zealand, I think. And there was a guy, it wasn't Phil Knights, but there might have been a guy at Nike who basically discovered this whole running culture, which I think started in New Zealand, which shouldn't surprise us. I think small islands, rather, you know, I'm a bit of a Darwinist here, rather like the Galapagos, if you get those smaller, more isolated places, they often, just as they spawn really weird bird life, they often spawn, you know, really interesting, you know, movements. You know, I would always recommend that, you know, anybody, I've never been to New Zealand, but I would like to go there and just have a shufti, because I reckon there are ideas there you can nick.
I wouldn't say a jog is a weird movement, Rory.
No, you want to remember, it was. It seriously was. There was a famous case where a senator got arrested for jogging. So in the early days, no, because the police, not unreasonably, thought, what the fuck are you doing? No, so I've got to make this point, because I'm old, right? I always make this point, sorry to people who've heard this before. I used a mobile phone on Oxford Street, 1989. It wasn't my mobile phone. The company had a pool of mobile phones which you signed out. Someone rang me on Oxford Street. I answered the phone, and 2 people shouted abuse at me from passing taxis. So I was there with this brick mobile phone on Oxford Street making a phone call. Someone in a black cab pulled down the back window and shouted, wanker. Okay?
I don't think it's because of the phone, Rory.
When I first got a mobile phone, which would have been about 1990, 1991, the phone rang. I was on the top of a London bus. The phone rang. It was my friend in America. And I said something like, what time is it over there? Or something. I then realized that I'd revealed to the other people on the bus, not only was I on a mobile phone, but I was talking to someone in a different country. And I was actually mildly concerned at the threat of physical violence against me. And we forget all this. Okay, the backstory, we concertina the past, okay, down. And the backstory is they weren't mobile phones, then someone invented the mobile phone and we all got one. Everything requires marketing because everything significant requires behavioral change. Humans find behavioral change difficult. The biggest mistake you can make, I think, in a business is to think, I've got a big idea, therefore it doesn't require marketing. Because the bigger your idea is, the more behavioral change is required, therefore the more marketing it will need.